Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to part 4 of the Newsfeed app tutorial on Turbo 360. In the last part 3, we set up the Redux environment and connected the feeds data to the Redux store and rendered them in the sidebar. In this unit, we're going to reorganize some of the components into better organizational structure, and then we're going to start rendering some actual data feeds from the RSS that we've listed in the back end. So let's get started. So here's where we left off. If we run the dev server just to make sure everything still works, here's what we have. And then if you go to Turbo, so if you go to turbo360.co and log in if you haven't already, select the project and click on entities, and you'll see the feed from last time, which you can update or remove if you want. So everything still works. We're good to go. Let's go ahead and make a few adjustments though. So if you look at the sidebar component, you'll see that we're inside the presentation directory. However, we're connecting this component to the Redux store, which really means it's a container component. So this is really not properly organized. The data that we're rendering from the store is right here, this list of feeds. So really, this should be the container component. So what we want to do right now is go to the containers directory and create a new component called feeds. Which is where all this will go. So if we open that up, open up the index, and remove the user's default entry and open up the feeds container. And let's set it up. Okay, so if we go back to our sidebar, let's import that guy. And then render it right here. Open a new tab in your terminal and run Webpack. Run the Turbo dev server, and then reload the app. And here it is right here. So that means it worked. So we're good to go. So let's set up the feeds container as a container. So if we go to the sidebar and grab the constructor right here, we want to actually have this inside the feeds container, but we don't want that. Actually, we don't even need the constructor. We can just we'll just leave it there. It's not a big deal. And then let's grab the componented mount. We do need this, however, and grab the feeds from the feeds container. Now bear in mind, we do need to grab the connect and the actions import, as well as the state to props and dispatch to props. So we can connect the feeds component to the Redux environment. And there we go. And now let's, in the component mount in the sidebar, let's just comment out the entire thing. Okay, check back in on Webpack. Okay, good. So now what we really want to do is take all of this, get rid of that from the sidebar, and now we lost the feeds in there, and then grab it inside the container like so. Now keep in mind this, don't forget this variable right here, the feeds variable. So we want to grab that from the sidebar as well and declare it right there. Now we're back in business. So now we're rendering this from the feeds container, which is definitely a step in the right direction. So let's now go back to the sidebar. You see here is the container. And let's sort of deconnect the sidebar. So let's get rid of all this. We don't need all three of these actually. Okay. Alright, good. So now our sidebar is sort of deconnected. So let's get rid of that. Get rid of that. Okay. Now, really what we want to do is have this update feed, add feed in its own container as well. So let's do it this way. Let's see here. Let me try something real quick. Let's go to the pages, the home page component where we're rendering all of this. So here it is right here. And let's grab the feeds from the containers. I'm going to grab all of this content right here from the sidebar and then put it inside here. I'm going to replace the sidebar component with the literal content from the sidebar. But bear in mind, these functions will crash the app unless we bring them over as well, so we want to grab these as well. Okay, let's rebuild Webpack and rerun the web server, the dev server. And everything still works. So let me explain why I'm doing all this. So inside this home page component, this layout component basically, we're rendering a feeds container right here. And according to sort of React best practice, the container should then render a series of presentational components, whereas before we were doing it in reverse. And that's really sort of anti-best practice. That's not really how they teach it in the sort of the main documentation. So I reorganized these components to basically have to follow more prescribed best practice, as you find in the documentation and from people like Dan Abramov, the inventor of Redux. So I'm just following their guidelines there. So we really don't need this sidebar component anymore. Oh, excuse me. And then when we reload, everything is back in business. And just to make sure, I'm going to add one more feed. Test feed URL. And that crashed. So let's see what's going on. Oh, right, because this is not connected to the store. So we need to connect the home component. So really what should happen is this right here should also be another container component because we're connecting it to the dispatch and we want to have that update the data, the feeds data. I'm going to do a little bit of shorthand right here for now, just for the sake of time. But as an exercise, you should do that on your own and then render the container component. Import actions. So right now we're in the pages. So here we are going to set up a state to props. This should actually just be the same as the feeds one, so we're just going to use that. And then we will connect it. And now these functions will be connected, which is why we were getting a crash, because we were calling a function that wasn't there. So it didn't work. Let's try it again. And here it is. And it's still there. Let's go back to our Turbo backend. And here it is right here. Let's remove that because it's just a test. Alrighty, good. So like I was saying a few minutes ago, this is really more of a temporary thing. This right here should be its own container component that performs that functionality. So on your own, that should be a good exercise. You want to create another container component called, add feed, create feed, put it in this directory, and then render that component in this page layout, so that this shouldn't be connected to the Redux store. So that's that. Okay. So now let's establish a selected feed reference. So in the feeds container, let's create a function called select feed, which is going to take a feed argument as well as an event. And then let's just console log. And then let's bind our feed hyperlink this guy right here to that function. And don't forget to pass in the feed itself. So now when I reload, I should see, oh, I forgot to prevent default. Okay, here it is. For some reason my console log isn't working. I'm going to switch over to Safari. And I'll figure that out later. But we're definitely going to need the console log, so. It's something I'm doing in the code. Alright, well, this is going to have to do for now, because I'm not really sure why the console log isn't working. It's never actually happened to me before, so I'm sure it's something silly that I'm doing that I overlooked. But that is strange. Alright, well, it's working, as you can see by this alert. So let's go ahead and add an action called select feed. Now this is a synchronous action, so this is a little bit simpler. Select feed, data, feed. So this right here should really come from the constants, and then we need to go to the constants and create that feed, that constant. And then in the feed reducer, we need to set up a handler for that. And we are now creating a new property on the reducer called selected, which will be initialized as null. Now if we go back to the feeds container, we want to connect that action to the component. Passing in the feed itself as the data payload, and then here we can just call it directly. Select feed, and well, since our console log isn't really cooperating right now, I don't think this is going to matter. Let's see if this works anyway, just in case. All right, well, that still works. Okay, so now what we want to do is add a color to indicate if the feed is selected. So feed this props feed selected. If this is the selected feed, we want red. Otherwise, we'll go with a dark shade of gray. So keep in mind now, in our reducer, we have a new property called selected, which we then define as the selected feed if we select a feed. Now, if in the list of feeds, if that is the selected one, then we should give it a color to distinguish that, which in this case will be red. So now if I reload and select it, there it is. So now if I add another feed, and reload, I can select this one and it stays red, and I can select this one and it toggles. And that's it. So now we have a way of maintaining the state of which feed is selected, which is good. So what we're going to want is to have this area update based on that. So let's go ahead and set up the home section. Which is right here. Welcome to newsfeed. So let's see here. Let's get rid of that learn more button. Okay, let's go to our containers component. Let's create a new container called feed. So we have feeds and then just the feed itself. And then this is going to be a connected component. That's why we made it a container. So for now, I'm going to copy and paste the feeds into here. Don't forget to change the name though. Like that. I just copied and pasted. And let's get rid of everything except the render. Now if we go back to the home component, let's grab all of this right here. Okay, and then let's grab that from the container. And let's get rid of this. run the dev server, and we lost the entire content area because I'm going to replace it with the new feed component that we just wrote. And now we're back in business. So the reason I did that was so that in the feed component, we actually don't need this dispatch, any of these dispatch to props. Let's just get rid of these. Right here, I want to render the selected feed, this props, the feed from the store, selected. So now this component is grabbing the selected feed from the store, the Redux store. And we want to, let's see here. Now bear in mind it can be null, so we want to render this right here only if it's not null. And then let's render the selected feed.name. Okay, let's do it this way instead. Title, name. And let's render that over here. And then there we go. Okay, and then welcome to newsfeed. Cool. Now we're starting to see some interactivity here, so that's good. Sorry for the back and forth. I'm kind of just improvising as I go here, but as you can see, it takes some trial and error before you settle on the best way to organize your components and whatnot. But it's also a good way to get comfortable with React in general. So, all right, let's see. We're not really using the state here, the constructor, so we don't need that. Okay, great. So this video went a little bit longer than I thought, so I'm going to cut it off here. But in the next video, we're actually going to process these feeds from their RSS URLs when I select it. So when I click this right here, I want to see the actual updated posts from the Daily News. When I click this, I want to see the updated posts from test feed or whatever the actual feed is going to be, and have them render right here. So we need a function to do that. It's going to be an action which will be invoked every time I select one of these feeds. So I guess this video is more about organizing your code slightly better. There are other ways we could have done this. The reason why I made this a container component is because I need to register a listener for whenever the selected feed was changed, which happened in here. So herein lies basically the key sort of benefit of Redux. is that when a change happens in this component automatically is listening by virtue of the connect function down here. That's sort of the magic of Redux. And I mean, I hate to use the word magic, but that's what the benefit of Redux is. And you know, a lot of beginners, they make the mistake of trying to maintain the state in the individual components and sort of pass the properties back and forth, which is basically treating React like it's an Angular project or like an MVC project, which it really isn't. And so you want to get used to this way of thinking. So yeah, hopefully you were able to follow along with that. Another way we could have done it is because since the home component is connected already, we could just render this as a presentation component and pass it down as a property. Pass down the selected feed as a property. That would have worked as well. The reason I did not do that is because the home component, I really don't want it to be connected at all. So in reality, this is the reason why we connected it. You want to take it out and make this its own container and have that in here. According to the sort of the best practice theory, the presentation components should be rendered inside the container components. So you don't want to reverse that. So that's why I didn't do that. So that's it for now, and then in the next video we will start actually processing these feeds and rendering them right here, so that this is an easier way to shuffle through the websites you visit on a regular basis. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.